Now, Phil Robertson is the Deputy Director at the Asia Division at Human Rights Watch. He joins us now from Bangkok. Welcome to Ticker News. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thanks for your time. Now, firstly, Human Rights Watch is concerned about the humanitarian abuses in Asia. What countries in particular are you watching and why at the moment?
Well, certainly Myanmar, also known as Burma, is at the top of our list. North Korea. We're looking also at Afghanistan, Sri Lanka. I mean, there's a host of governments across the region that are abusing human rights, and we're hoping that the Quad will take up these issues and promote democracy and human rights across the region, and not just focus only on China.
In terms of what you're seeing from countries in the region and the importance and seriousness that they're taking with some of these issues at the moment, what would you rate that at this stage? How seriously are countries and world leaders taking these abuses, do you think?
Well, unfortunately, in Myanmar, we've seen a real drop in international attention to what is a worsening situation of human rights. And when you look at countries like Japan and India, which are members of the Quad, they have done very little substantive to address the human rights crisis in Myanmar. The Australian government has done very little as well, and we're hoping, obviously, with a new Australian government coming in and a new prime minister, that will change. But there has to be joint pressure from the Quad to make human rights issues come up front in some of the conversations with these various governments that are abusing rights around the region.
So the Quad requires Asia's support in a bid to counter China. Do you think that is a reason that they're turning a blind eye to some of these human rights abuses?
Well, we're worried that it's becoming a bit like the old Cold War, where human rights abuses get ignored in pursuit of a wider objective of containment. The reality, of course, is that China is a major human rights abuser in the region, and certainly there should be action on human rights issues in China. But that shouldn't come at the expense of addressing other issues like North Korea, like Myanmar, like Sri Lanka, like Afghanistan, like the Philippines, all places where, countries like Japan, Australia, the United States, and India have significant influence, and they should use it.
In terms of some of these human rights abuses, for people out there that may have a vague idea but don't watch it as closely as you or understand exactly what's taking place, can you paint a picture of what is happening, particularly in North Korea at the moment and any other regions in that area?
Well, North Korea still maintains a gulag. It has as many as 80,000 to 100,000 political prisoners in horrible conditions in the mountains, being forced to work, dying because of abuse. There is significant restrictions on movement. There's a lack of adequate food. Now there's a COVID outbreak and no vaccines because the government has refused international assistance to date to bring vaccines into the country. It's a human rights disaster zone. It is a black hole. It is amongst the worst of the worst in the region. And the problem is, too often everybody wants to just talk about North Korea's nuclear weapons and missiles and not talk about the human rights abuses that make the people so afraid that they never dare challenge their government. And, of course, that allows a government to divert such significant resources from starving people into weapons development.
Let's talk about some solutions that you're looking at, practical solutions that Human Rights Watch is offering in the region. Break down what you want this to look like.
Well, in Myanmar, we want to see an international arms embargo against the military coup government there. We want to see significant attention on human rights issues across the region. We want to see greater targeted sanctions, targeted economic sanctions against the military leaders and their economic interests. And that means Australia, particularly using its new sanctions authority that was passed just several months ago by the Parliament. In Afghanistan, there has to be pressure on the Taliban regime to stop violating the rights of women and children, particularly women who are now facing significant restrictions on their right to livelihoods. They're being forced to dress in certain ways. They're being deprived of education because schools are still closed for girls. It's a major issue. In Colombo, in Sri Lanka, we have seen violent crackdown against protesters. We're seeing major economic deprivation, and it's born of human rights abuses and corruption of the Rajapaksas and the government that they've led that have caused all these problems.
Phil, just finally, it's more of a broad question, but in terms of the progress that the world does see when it comes to human rights, these are major human rights abuses that you're touching on here. Are we making progress? Are we getting any better, at least to hold some sort of silver lining, or do you not see that?
Well, I would say in the Asia Pacific region, the situation is not improving. We have seen the eclipse of, multi-party democracy. We have seen increased dictatorial rule in places like Cambodia, places like Philippines. We are seeing now erosion of rights abuses against vulnerable minorities like women and LGBT people in Indonesia and Malaysia. In Thailand, we're still dealing with a quasi-military government. So I hate to say it, but across the Asia Pacific region, which of course is a major concern to the people of Australia, we've seen human rights backsliding across the region and an incredible erosion of respect for rights and protection for rights that should be in place.
Well, that's clearly a sad state to be in. But Phil, thank you so much for your work and your insight, and fingers crossed we can hope for more, and we'll touch base soon.
Thank you so much.